Effective diplomacy. Internationalism is at the core of the labour movement. We recognise our responsibility to confront injustices we see today and to correct the injustices of the past. We will establish a judge-led inquiry into our country's alleged complicity in rendition and torture, and the operation of secret courts. Issue a formal apology for the Jallianwala Bagh massacre, and hold a public review into Britain's role in the Amritsar massacre. Allow the people of the Chagos Islands and their descendants the right to return to the lands from which they should never have been removed. Uphold the human rights of the people of West Papua and recognise the rights of the people of the Western Sahara. We have a duty to stand up for the security and sovereignty of our overseas territories, including the Falklands, and for the rights of our citizens and dual nationals abroad, and will continue fighting for justice on behalf of Nazanin Zaghari Ratcliffe and other British nationals wrongly imprisoned or suffering mistreatment in captivity abroad. Human rights. Human rights and international humanitarian law are fundamental pillars of a secure global system. These principles are now under threat. Some of the world's most powerful states choose to sell arms to human rights abusing states. Conservative ministers, including Boris Johnson, have signed off well over £2 billion of arms sales to repressive regimes since June 2017. Around the world, human rights defenders and civil society activists remain vulnerable to attacks, often carried out with impunity. We will immediately suspend the sale of arms to Saudi Arabia for use in Yemen and to Israel for arms used in violation of the human rights of Palestinian civilians, and conduct a root and branch reform of our arms exports regime so ministers can never again turn a blind eye to British-made weapons being used to target innocent civilians. Reform the international rules-based order to secure justice and accountability for breaches of human rights and international law, such as the bombing of hospitals in Syria, the illegal blockade of the Gaza Strip, the use of rape as a weapon of war against the Rohingya community in Myanmar, and the indiscriminate bombardment of civilians in Yemen. We will work through the UN and the Commonwealth to insist on the protection of human rights for Sri Lanka's minority Tamil and Muslim populations. Appoint human rights advisors to work across the Foreign Office and government to prioritise a coordinated approach to human rights. Advocate for human rights at every bilateral diplomatic meeting. Climate diplomacy. There is no greater injustice today than countries in the global south paying the price for a climate crisis they did not cause. Yet some world leaders, including US President Donald Trump and Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro, champion a climate change denial agenda. Britain's climate change diplomacy was respected internationally, playing an important role in securing the Paris Agreement, following the leading role the UK played in securing the Kyoto Agreement. However, Boris Johnson, who has described global warming as a primitive fear without foundation, has overseen a 60% cut in the UK's global network of climate experts. Only Labour can rebuild Britain's leadership on the most serious threat to our shared humanity. We will rebuild our climate expertise within the Foreign Office, putting climate diplomacy at the heart of our foreign policy. Use our influence at the UN, EU, G7, G20, World Bank, the Commonwealth, and other global institutions to promote policies to tackle the climate emergency. Use our diplomatic expertise to negotiate and deliver more ambitious global targets to deal with the climate emergency, starting with COP26 in Glasgow next year. Prioritising conflict prevention and building peace. The Conservatives have failed to play a constructive role in resolving the world's most pressing humanitarian crises, including in Kashmir, Yemen, and Myanmar, and the escalation of tensions with Iran. The treatment of the Kurdish people in Syria, including by Turkey, and of the Uyghurs in China has been met with total inaction and apathy by the current UK government. In some cases, they set aside regard for international law, including refusing to criticise Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia over the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Labour is committed to a comprehensive peace in the Middle East based on a two-state solution, a secure Israel alongside a secure and viable state of Palestine. There can be no military solution to this conflict, which must be settled on the basis of justice and international law. All sides must avoid taking action that would make peace harder to achieve. That means both an end to the blockade, occupation and settlements, and an end to rocket and terror attacks. Labour will continue to press for an immediate return to meaningful negotiations leading to a diplomatic resolution. A Labour government will immediately recognise the state of Palestine. Labour will take all lawful action necessary to counter and confront all forms of terrorism, and we will advocate a long-term multinational political strategy led by regional actors to tackle the spread of extremism. We believe effective diplomacy can address the drivers of conflict and insecurity. We will build support for UN reform, including assessing and developing democratization initiatives and improving the engagement of the General Assembly in decision-making to ensure its institutions are more effective at achieving peace. Prioritize our responsibility to prevent conflict by investing in local capacities for peace building in areas of conflict, advocating for political, multilateral strategies for peace. Act immediately to urge negotiations towards a political resolution to conflict wherever it arises, including in the Middle East and Sub-Saharan Africa.